Many of you, but not all, okay, joined us for our earlier session for this complete webinar, which is really on bus safety and innovation. You joined us for the first portion, which was on bus of the future, and it took in just to try a full gamut, okay, and we were delighted to be able to have that set the context, and then we're leading now into the second listening session, okay, which is really very extremely youth centered, and this is where we really delve into the really this big issue that we have been having, and it's a meteoric increase in terms of transit worker assaults, okay, and what exactly let's be clear about the dimensions of this, the meteoric rise, what we think causes are, and most importantly, solutions, recommendations, and actions and solutions. Okay, so with that, once again, I'm Bev Scott. For those of you I've not had the pleasure of meeting, founder of Introducing Youth to American Infrastructure. Every year, we wind up doing what we call a critical conversation series in our youth program, where we focus on an issue of industry-wide significance, which has major implications for community today and the future, and where it is imperative that we have a youth-centered perspective. And I'm delighted to take us on, Isaiah. I'm going to do this in 5 minutes because I don't want to hold up. Once again, to acknowledge we have so many people that help us with putting our program on every year, but I would be so remiss if I did not acknowledge the longstanding support by the American Public Transportation Association, Moneta Transportation Institute, the Allen Group out of the Bay Area, Bev Scott and Associates, and then we just have it, and then our local host organizers, and which we have 12 this year from all over the United States, and we're very pleased. Toronto Transit Commission in Canada are actually the participating members of of our program, and they make it all happen. We also have a long-standing set of many people who support the program, but I really want to draw attention to national advisors that we have. Of course, American Public Transportation Association. You'll hear from Paul Scatellis in a moment, but very key for us is the Amalgamated Transit Union. They are the largest transit union in North America, and I can't say enough about President Costa and just the support that he has consistently shown our program. And just we've never asked, okay, for to help us with technical content, help us with whatever, where he's not been there. And we're just very pleased. And Andrew Falatica, that you're going to be hearing from, he's going to frame this one as well, this session as well, is a health and safety director for Amalgamated. Okay, then the 2025 local organizers. Here are the participants in our overall program for 2025, and we couldn't do the work without them. And I really want to highlight with APTA's is that this particular panel has APTA's emerging leaders, in which we're always thrilled, as well as AYA program alum, okay? And they're alum, and they're also participants or coordinators in their respective areas. And we just, once again, couldn't do the programming without you, and are really very responsible for helping us select what the critical conversations focus will be each year. A few words from Paul Scatellis, and then I'm going to be turning this over to Isaiah Shahone. Okay, and Isaiah is our program coordinator, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him. Okay, take it away to Paul, and then
Hello,
to
I'm Paul
Isaiah.
Scatellis, President and CEO of the American Public Transportation Association, known as APTA. It has been our pleasure to be a longtime supporter of introducing youth to American infrastructure, known as AYA. And we're proud to be the platinum sponsor for AYA's 2025 Sustainable Mobility Career Awareness and Innovation Challenge. This year, as AYA launched its 2025 Critical Conversations series, we're especially pleased to see the focus on transit worker safety, an urgent shared priority across our industry. We look forward to seeing how AYA's young leaders and community partners explore innovative approaches to this critical issue. Across the transportation sector, our greatest, most valuable asset is our people. And there is no greater challenge or opportunity than ensuring we're able to attract and retain a diverse, well-prepared, and motivated workforce that reflects the communities we serve. It is our pleasure to continue supporting AYA's efforts to inspire, empower, and connect the next generation of leaders, workforce professionals, and change makers in public transportation.
And with those words from Paul, I also want to acknowledge U.S. Department of Transportation, as well as the Canadian government. And I think Andrew went through it very much this morning. The emphasis that they have increasingly placed on this critical issue of transit worker assaults and safety overall in terms of the public transportation systems. For the first time on the U.S. side, new directives that have required the submission of data and information in terms of what's happening in the system. And then, of course, they were some of the, on the US DOT end, they were some of the originals in terms of even starting this whole work of looking at bus of the future, which is a combination of safety first, as well as innovation and improvement of the overall passenger experience. And then as Andrew went in, and I'm sure he'll say a little bit more about that as he's talking about the framing of the issue, is the tremendous work in that area that is taking place in Canada. And once again, the criticality of partnerships. Okay. Now, I'm very pleased to now turn it over to Isaiah Shahan, who is the program manager for AYA's youth programming. And he started with us. He's he's in Chicago, and he started with us almost 5 years ago when he was when we were doing our programming in Chicago that year. And he's a University of Illinois graduate, okay, and in Chicago. And he always laughs and says, I started this thing and I signed up on the portal. That was the year that everything went virtual, okay, overnight. And Isaiah was there with us then, and we've been absolutely honored and fortunate to have him be able to remain with us. And that's kind of what happens in this program. We go deeper. So with that and with no ado, we would not be able to do the things that we do in this program without Isaiah. So I tip my hat to you and turn it to you. Thank you.
I wish I had I'm trying to look for the closest cap. All right. See, I got a hat and I tip myself back to you. You know what I mean? Shout out Dr. Scott for sure. So before I go in depth into whatever I wanted to say, I'll give a quick overview as to what the session will look like. I'll say a little bit, but then we'll go directly over to Mr. Andrew Filatico, who will essentially give a frame/scope of the transit worker assault situation. Because, you know, at this point, we've already said transit worker assaults like 4 to 5 times. But, you know, what does that really mean? What does that really look like on a grander scale? So that's why we have Mr. Filatico here. So thank you so much for that. After that, we will be directing our presentations over to Mr. Alexander House and then Ms. Deepika Gangwani afterwards. Following that, we'll be having a guided discussion with Deepika, Alexander, and Miss Natalie Kindred from Chicago. So, you know, also shout out to Chicago on a totally unrelated note. You know, every day transit workers across North America show up to do one of the most essential jobs in our society, which is, you know, keeping our communities moving. But far too often they deal with threats of verbal harassment or physical assault. You know, the assaults have been rising at an alarming rate. And, you know, I don't want to steal too much of Andrew's thunder because this is what he goes in depth into in a couple minutes after me. But I just like, having done a little bit of my research myself, learning about this topic and seeing Andrew and other presenters go, I've quickly realized that it's not just a transit problem, it's a community problem. And because of that, it requires community solutions. You know what I mean? Because, you know, this is an issue that intersects with safety, public trust, labor rights, youth equity. When a bus operator is attacked, it doesn't just affect the actual operator, but all the riders inside of it. It shakes the confidence in the public system. And, you know, it deepens the sense that public spaces aren't safe for anyone. I can relate to that on a personal level. When Dr. Scott asked me to be the moderator for this session, I thought like, oh, okay, like, let's just get the token young person to lead a conversation about what youth's role needs to be in transit worker assaults. But then, you know, I went back a little bit to my past, and, you know, I've been on buses where I've seen bus operators be harassed. I've almost witnessed a bus operator be assaulted. I had to step in on that bus to stop any kind of conflicts from happening. I played that de-escalation role at a young age in my life. And at the time I didn't realize it, but um having been through scary, traumatizing encounters of that myself, I quickly realized that, um having these conversations are important because young people aren't just riders, we're community builders, we're innovators, storytellers, advocates. We have the power to essentially change transit culture, to challenge the norms, to call out that harm, and ultimately build solidarity between workers and riders. So, as we hear from Andrew, Alexander, Deepika, Natalie, who are on the front lines of safety, policy, and prevention, I invite all of the attendees to think about your role having left this webinar today. How can you speak up, show up, and support the people who support your cities, who support your transit systems? Because, for me personally, safety is not just about enforcement, it's about culture, right? And culture starts with us. So that's my mini mic drop moment. I will quickly introduce all of our speakers. Mr. Andrew Filatico is the Health and Safety Director for the ATU International and is responsible for creating and conducting health and safety trainings, leading initiatives to improve working conditions and safety standards for ATU members across the US and Canada. He's an advocate for reducing violence and harassment in the workplace, along with bringing awareness to mental health issues. He plays a vital role in the Bus Design Innovation Project, working with the Toronto Transit Commission, who we heard from earlier today, and Centennial College to incorporate FTA Bus of the Future recommendations that we went upon earlier today, which address several safety concerns. That having had that conversation prior to this, it really gives a lot of context as to why all this needs to drive forward to a greater cause. So thank you so much in advance to Andrew for delivering that frame, delivering that scope. I will now introduce Mr. Alexander Hauk. Alexander embarked on a journey as a student bus driver at the University of Virginia. This is what I'm talking about when I say it's important for those young people to be in these initial conversations, to be exposed to, so they can see how much is going on. And that initial bus driver experience for Mr. Hauk ignited a passion for safe and efficient transit solutions that has shaped nearly his 2 decades of experience in the transportation industry. He continues to demonstrate a commitment to safety, having completed the US DOT Public Transportation Safety Certification training programs for rail and bus. And he served as an FTA keynote presenter. Just a light flex. It's about on agency safety plans and safety management systems. He's a member of Latinos in Transit, APTA's Safety Coordinating Council, and as Dr. Scott mentioned earlier today, he is in the 2025 graduating class of the APTA Emerging Leaders Program. Thank you so much, Mr. House, for joining. And he'll be talking a bit more about his time in the Maryland Transit Administration on how he has spearheaded the development of a comprehensive assault reduction program at a property in Virginia. But like I said, I don't want to spoil too much. That's his shine to showcase. So he'll be taking care of that one. Shout out to Miss Deepika Gangwani, who is the manager of corporate deliverables at the Toronto Transit Commission with 13 years of public sector experience, including 9 years in public transport. Also a graduate of the 2025 APTA Emerging Leaders, Deepika has held diverse roles at the TTC, starting from all the way from frontline customer service to administrative positions at data analyst and management roles. We heard earlier today how at AC Transit, you can start from a janitor to a management role. So we see that mobility happening in real time in this webinar with us. She serves as a vice chair of the APTA Operations Technical Forum Committee and participates in the WTS mentorship program. She's also a dedicated volunteer with the Toronto Police Auxiliary Constable and also sits on the Centennial College Alumni Association Board as director at large. In her role, she leads emergency preparedness tabletop exercises and supports frontline transit operations, proudly using the TT system for her daily commute. So, like Dr. Scott says, we walk when we talk. This is the actual person who actually utilizes the systems that we are looking to work to fix towards, to nurture towards. So thank you so much, Deepika, for that. And last but certainly not least, I have to shout out Miss Natalie Kindred. Like I said, home court advantage. On a totally unrelated note, we're both from Chicago, so I got to give that shout out to her. Miss Kindred manages the career and development team at Chicago Transit Authority, bringing over 15 years of professional expertise to the organization. Since joining CTA's training and workforce development and learning and support team in November 2019, she has guided employee development initiatives that strengthen the agency's workforce. And with dual master degrees in leadership and workplace conflict resolution, as well as pastoral counseling, her background offers a valuable perspective on conflict management principles, which falls right in line into the conversations we're going to have today, which include de-escalation strategies for transit personnel. As a certified career coach and Gallup certified Clifton Strengths coach, she leads personal development programs that enhance capabilities across all levels of the organization, contributing to CTA's holistic approach to employee support and safety. So I know I just said a lot of words right there, but it's all about laying down the scope, which is why I would like to perfectly hand it over now to Mr. Andrew Filatico, who does a way better job than me at laying down the scope of these transit worker assaults. So, you know what, Mr. Andrew, I will hand the floor over to you, and thank you so much in advance. And just let us know, like, what's going on here. Yes, what's going on here?
All right, thanks, Isaiah. And before I get started, I just want to shout out to you and Dr. Beverly once again for putting together a great process here to reach out to all the transit professionals. And I am honored to be part of a panel with Deepika, Natalie, and Alexander. And I look forward to what we can do to collaborate in our communication and bring in those questions. So I'm going to start this presentation. Just let me know if you do see it, please.
Yep. And then
Yes.
slideshow
Mhm.
button, it should be good.
Oh, that's great. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity for taking the time to be here today. In today's presentation overview, we're going to take a look at assault prevention for transit professionals, take a look at what's going on in the industry, and also we're going to dig into a little bit of the psychosocial hazards for mental health. I do want to make a point here. It'll be reiterated through the presentation that a psychosocial hazard is basically, if you take a look at the Occupational Health and Safety Act or through OSHA, it is classified as a hazard, and that really is a hazard that affects your mental or your emotional well-being. Now, when we take a look at assaults that take place on operators or frontline workers, that is considered a psychosocial hazard. So that's one of the profilings, actually, physical assaults, spitting, kicking, stabbing, shootings, and so on. The assault or the psychosocial hazard can potentially affect the worker's mental health, depending on their threshold, which then could have a residual effect that could transpire into mental illness. So I just want you to understand the correlation here. A psychosocial hazard can affect someone's mental health based on their threshold, which then potentially could transpire into mental illness. We have an epidemic on transit professionals. Unfortunately, operators, every day they face the real threat of being strangled, stabbed, shot, or worse. Some have died. When we take a look at some statistics through the FTA, there has been an increase of operator assaults, 300%, 2009 to 2023, that's gone up. And there's also been a lot of reports on the fact that that's been underreported. So we need to take that into consideration. However, some of the good news that I'd like to put out there is, as much as something is as negative as an assault, the FTA has done a great job in making sure that Public Transportation Agency's plan has been implemented. And with that plan has come a program within the plan called a risk reduction program that basically identifies assaults and the events, the occurrence of assaults, and also the definition of assault has been upgraded to make sure that it includes language that says interfering with the operator. So having said that, there are tools and mechanisms in place. So those who have agencies, who have committees, it's very important to use these tools so we can best mitigate the potential exposures of assaults that would happen to operators. And just a little stat here in Canada, approximately there's 2,000 assaults on bus drivers every year. And unfortunately, in this clip here, a 16-year-old decided to pay the bus driver who didn't feel like paying their bus fare by stabbing them. This is the reality of what's going on in our society every day. We need to take a hard look at violence. It's not an agency problem, it's a societal problem. Workplace is not immune to the violence that that takes place within our society. We need to take a hard look at that. Workplace violence, physical and psychological, it has become a significant global problem. When we take a look at safety, it's a dynamic process, a process that involves behavior, environment, and equipment. So in order to have a continuous process of improvement for safety management systems, we need to take a look at what's changing, and we need to be part of that change. And that's why I'm a very strong advocate for having worker-centered joint health and safety committees or joint labor management committees at the table so we can talk, make recommendations, and be part of the process. As you can see, some of these situations are very disturbing. Our operators on a daily basis in some areas may be subjected to this. Some are worse, some are less. But I think we need to take a hard look at what we can do coming together and having to change assaults and mitigating them, and particularly the potential exposures. This slide here demonstrates advancement through the mitigation process of assaults. A joint labor management committee was put together in the year of 2022 after a series of assaults took place in Toronto. They were on the rise, and this joint labor management committee has a 10-point action plan. I did mention this earlier in the previous presentation. And in this 10-point action plan, would they take a look at strong data that comes in on a regular basis based on occurrence events, everything that might potentially be an assault up to and including what is an assault. And their 10-point action plan looks at improving existing training for employees. Information, education is paramount. For those on the management side, administrative controls are very important so that we can get the proper training to get our workers in a safe position. They've developed internal and external communication campaigns that have gone abroad to the city as well, including community engagement programs, strengthening penalties for assaults and transit workers, implementing vehicle and facility improvements. We've looked at, this is where the Bus of the Future Bus Design Innovation Program comes in, supported by the 10-point action plan, having to have fully enclosed barriers, making sure our operators are protected. If you notice in the last two videos, those barriers weren't fully enclosed. And the investment to actually make those barriers fully enclosed and make sure they're not impeding sight lines, the reality is if we take a look at the assaults that take place and the money that's being spent on insurance claims, WSIB, sick time, we need to take a hard look at that. Maybe we need to reinvest that money in proper engineering controls. Further looking at the 10-point action plan, increase frontline presence, support through transit network. That would include our special constables and our police departments. And I just want to let you know, this action plan involves Joint Health and Safety Committee workers as well as management teams. We're there to make sure that there's proper risk assessments. Now, I had mentioned earlier about the Public Transportation Agency Plan, having a risk reduction program that identifies the occurrence of assaults and what you can do to measure that, to make sure we can make proper recommendations. In Canada, by law, as a requirement through the government, the employer must do a risk assessment every time there is an act of violence. That assessment then goes to the Joint Health and Safety Committee by law to assess, to then make a recommendation. And through that process, they can also look at the policy and the program to make sure it's tailored to the interest of the workers, to make sure that mitigation of potential exposures will be minimized. So when we take a look at the question is, how do we prevent? What can we do? I think it's very important. Joint labor management partnerships through Joint Health and Safety Committee and following a process and making sure it's followed so that we can have proper risk reduction is paramount. Earlier, I talked about psychosocial hazards in the workplace, and I had mentioned that under the Occupational Health and Safety Act and under OSHA, psychosocial hazard affects the emotional or mental well-being. And if there is an assault, then that potentially could affect the worker's mental health based on their personal threshold, which then could have a residual effect that could affect and move into mental illness. So just please keep that in mind. We take a look at psychosocial hazards as profiling them, that's fatigued and hours of long work, technological changes, stress and critical incident stress, bullying, including cyberbullying, workplace violence and abuse, trauma, and sexual harassment. All these are profiled under psychosocial hazards, mental and emotional well-being. When we take a look at some of the behaviors, threatening behaviors such as shaking fists, destroying property, throwing objects, verbal abuse, swearing, insults, condescending language, and of course, physical attacks, which we've witnessed today, hitting, shoving, pushing, kicking, spitting, and unfortunately, using weapons. A bit of a research that took place that I wanted to share with you with the International Transportation Worker Federations. Some of the risk factors that affected transit professionals with mental ill health. Number one was long hours, split shifts, inadequate rest breaks. They looked at bus design, the lack of protection from assaults, as we've witnessed today, a hostile work environment of harassment and lack of respect. I remember when I was a young boy growing up and my mom took me on my first bus ride, I was 9 years old. And those doors opened. I looked up at the bus driver and my mom held my hand and she says, "You say good morning to the bus driver. You say thank you to him when you leave." There was a position of respect back then. I think we need to recapture that somehow. Frontline workers do a great job. They're subjected to a lot of different environmental problems right now with violence and harassment. We need to show a little empathy towards that. And number four, there was a stigma over the discussion of mental health issues. Yep, that's right, a stigma over discussion of mental health issues that came up in this research. And if we take a look at a closer look at stigma, mental illness, it is a universal problem. And however, the stigma associated, unfortunately, it prevents 2/3 of those who are experiencing mental illness from seeking help. So the reality is people don't want to talk about it if they're suffering from anxiety disorders or sleeping disorders. They've gone through a psychosocial hazard of trauma, and they have they're in a position where the negative attitudes towards mental illness and negative behaviors are stopping them from having to reach out and get that support that's necessary. And I think if we're really going to make a difference with mental health and mental illness, we need to be the ones in the front line to say, okay, we're the first ones to talk about it. We need to put our foot forward. We need to demonstrate the empathy towards that person going through that issue or concern. Reality is we're all human beings. We all had those dark moments, some greater, some not as great as others. But the reality is we need to be cognizant of that. And the other thing is there's a discrimination towards mental illness. I mean, if I was to talk to you about someone receiving cancer treatment, and I'm sure that discussion would be full of understanding and compassion and support, but how would that go with someone talks about mental illness saying, I can't get out of bed in the morning, I'm afraid to leave the door, and I'm afraid to be able to be functional. Those are hard conversations to have. So we need to start putting our foot forward and understand the fact that when assaults go up, the rise in mental illness potentially goes with that. And when we take a look at what I'd mentioned before about psychosocial hazards in the workplace, prolonged exposure to these psychosocial hazards, they are related to increased problems and plus the stress experience that goes with these trauma situations. The harm from workplace violence can have an everlasting effect. It's unlike breaking a leg or cutting yourself. Eventually, it's going to heal. People will suffer from PTSD and trauma. We need to open up our support groups. We need to know what we can do to actually help our frontline workers to actually make a difference, not just with engineering controls with fully enclosed barriers, but understanding that they do have a difficult job, they do a great job, and we need to be able to support them. The reality is, for those who are listening, we don't know when violence will come into the workplace. We don't know when a worker, a sister, or a brother will succumb to a stabbing, a shooting, or a death. We just don't know that. What we do know is that we can review agency plans and programs. We can use training and information to help our workers. We can engage our health and safety committees for PTASP or for the requirements that we have in Canada. We can make recommendations. We can operate through proper risk assessment. We can use the safety management systems that's been introduced by the FTA for compliance for continuous improvement. These are the tools that we do have. And I do believe if we're going to make a strong and serious push in changing the industry, protecting our frontline workers, helping our agency succeed, and making a difference, we need to look at the tools that we have. It's not so much what we do on the back end after something happens, but think about what we can do on the front end to mitigate the potential exposure, the hazards. This is not an agency problem. This is an environmental, this is an everybody problem that we need to take a hard look at. Our environment has changed. Things have changed after COVID. Mental illness is on the increase and violence is up. This is our problem to look at together. And when we take a look at our commitment to health and safety, I strongly believe, please consider having joint labor management partnerships. Have a commitment to zero tolerance and violence, and make sure that mental health support looks at recognizing the link between mental health, safety, and promoting employee well-being. But most importantly, let us establish core values and behaviors that emphasize safety as an overriding priority. And lastly, I'd like to leave you with this, that the International Labor Organization, they came up with a great definition based on health and safety. And I believe this is a vision statement, and that health and safety is the promotion and the maintenance of the highest degree of physical, mental, social well-being, the prevention of ill health among workers caused by their working conditions. You, I, we, together, I think we can make a difference. And if we use the tools that are there, and they are there, and if we commit to them, we can change the landscape of health and safety in North America. Having said that, I'm honored once again to present, to be part of a team that is making a difference. Thank you kindly.
Thank you. Man. I don't even know what to say after that one, Andrew. We'll hand it over to Mr. Hauk to share his screen to deliver his presentation. But one thing I did want to say from that, Andrew, what, you know, just seeing like those clips and just like seeing all that information, details about people, it really just like, it really reminds us that, like, you know, it's not just like a number of bus operators. You know what I mean? These are like actual people behind, like, it's not just a statistic. These are actual people working on the lines every single day just for us to get from one place to another, to help keep our just nation moving. And, like, you know, just for the record, I'm totally not claiming this one as my own. I'm kind of stealing this from Andrew, but in our initial conversation we had a couple of weeks ago, like, one of the tidbits that he told me is that, like, one of his key roles in making this, in being a part of this work, is to humanize safety. You know what I mean? Ever since he said that, like, I literally have it written in my phone notes. Yeah, I still got it. Like, this is about humanizing safety. And I think that's like the biggest takeaway from that kind of presentation, to realize that, you know, these aren't just statistics. There are people behind every single situation that's going on. So, you know, truly thank you so much for that one, Mr. Andrew. We will be going over to Mr. Hauk, who will be talking a bit more about, you know, the implementation of Maryland's new legislation mandating a rider code of conduct, him collaborating closely with the Maryland Transit's Youth Transit Council to shape this policy and to get input from the next generation of riders. But, you know, like I said, I don't want to steal your thunder, Alexander. I will now hand over the floor to you, and thank you so much in advance.
Thank you, Isaiah, and thank you to Andrew for speaking from the union's perspective. And hopefully some of the things I touch on really speak to what he was asking for agencies to look at when we talk about building policy from the ground up. And I'm going to talk about my agency's response to transit worker assaults, and through that lens as not only the chair of our joint safety committee, so that labor management committee that Andrew spoke to, but also my role as the deputy chief safety officer for safety management system. Now, this is a problem, you know, that's clearly an industry problem. It's one that we have been tasked with looking at for a long time, even since before I joined MTA 3 years ago. And really, you know, it's been escalating since about 2008 is where you've really seen the increase in transit worker assaults. And then really you have this post-COVID just explosion of assaults. And that's where MTA really started to see it as well. From October of 2020 to October of 2021, unfortunately, 3 MTA transit operators were killed in the line of duty. One was a transit bus operator, and two were paratransit or mobility operators. That led to the administrator who had actually just taken over that role, Holly Arnold, calling for the creation of an operator assault task force that was focused on preventing and the response to these types of actions that were happening in the system. Some of the things, again, echoing what Andrew mentioned, that we have taken from this time until the present day is in keeping with the BIL requirements in Part 673 related to the PTAS. We have improved our de-escalation training and continue to improve it. We now offer a comprehensive mental health first aid training that we started 2 years ago that is open to our entire agency. And we now have over 100 employees across 40 different departments who are trained in that particular training. We have our Joint Labor Management Safety Committee, or as we call it at the MTA, just the JSC, the Joint Safety Committee, 50-50 Committee of Labor and Management coming together to review agency risk and the processes of mitigating hazards, including transit worker assault. And that is part of our PTAS revision that we do as well, and goal setting and setting safety performance targets around that metric. Prior to even the BIL, though, in the introduction of the JSC, MTA had stood up its Labor and Management Partnership, or its LAMP committee. They've had an Operators Advisory Council, the OAC, for a number of years. And of course, I mentioned we have had that Transit Worker Assault Task Force now in place since 2023, which is headed by our internal police force, the MTA Police. Recently, House Bill 1144 was passed and signed into law by Governor Wes Moore of Maryland, and we just launched our working group for that here on May 19th. And just to kind of touch on one of the visuals you see on the screen there, that is a screen grab of our transit worker assault dashboard. It's through Power BI, where we really collect data from these events and look into every aspect of it, from time of day, the mode, the route that was being driven, the assault type, based on our Maryland codes, whether there was a dispute over the fare, and then getting into some of the demographics between gender, age, time, length of service for the operator, et cetera. And of course, we started this prior to BIL authorization, so this does focus mostly on operators, and we are expanding it to all transit workers within our agency as well. So to touch a little bit on House Bill 1144 and Senate Bill 858, this was, again, brand new legislation that is really there to prohibit the use of the state's public transit services and stations by anyone who is, and this is a key word, alleged to have committed an assault on a transit employee or one of our passengers. So again, even absent an actual charge, a criminal charge, if an operator says this person assaulted them and caused bodily injury, they will be removed from the system and be issued, a basically cease and desist. They can't access the system, and then would likely be hit with trespassing if they were to be found. Now, like I said, this just had its kickoff. We have an October 1st deadline of implementing the full plan to be compliant with the legislation. And so we have a number of subcommittees who are working on different aspects of the program to make sure that everything is synthesized, reviewed, and that our multifaceted approach is really not only proactive, but that it takes into account things like justice for folks who are accused of this, and restoring their services if there is cause to. And I'll touch on that a little bit here in a few moments. It does require, though, it doesn't put the entire onus on the Maryland Transit Administration. We actually have to incorporate feedback from and work with our partners at WMATA in Washington, D.C. The Joint Safety Committee is called out in the legislation as being one of those cooperative committees that has to work through this. And then also representatives from our various operator unions. We have both the local 1300 and 1764 of ATU represented, SMART MD, and AFSCME Local 1859. And the legislation, again, it goes through and says what we are required to do, from creating a code of conduct, implementing a comprehensive internal safety program, figuring out the consequences and appeals process for folks who are banned at following an assault, and then making provisions for individual disabilities and also the youth of Baltimore. I'll touch on why that's so important specifically to our agency in just a moment here. And then we have to, this is not something that gets implemented, stood up, and then doesn't get revisited. We have to continually assess the effectiveness and recommend ongoing improvements. So this working group will continue for as long as this legislation is around. And we'll be joining a growing number of states. I believe there's 30 states right now that classify a special category of either misdemeanor or other criminal act if you assault a transit worker specifically. So we want to enhance those protections. So we did touch on the Youth Transit Council that MTA has. We started it 2 years ago, so it's in its second year. I did want to make a correction because I don't want to take credit for something. I don't work personally with them. We have fantastic staff who lead this effort, and so I want to make sure they get their kudos. But they did give me information to share on their behalf of what the YTC is doing in helping our Rider Code of Conduct be written for this legislation. So so within Baltimore, MTA provides the majority of school transportation to our city's youth. We don't have yellow bus service as you would see in other municipalities. So that's really important when I touched on a potential ban for assaults, because it doesn't make any determination of age. So we want to make sure that we are taking that into account. We're being very thoughtful and deliberate in that process, because by taking away somebody's right to ride our system, we could in fact be affecting their ability to get to school and to their classes. One of the things that YTC covers that wasn't previously that was a previous gap within the industry is that a lot of times when an agency has a public comment process and surveys, those are generally geared to a much older audience, adults who have more time, a different take on things. Isaiah touched on it in terms of being youth and being a transit rider. They're the next generation, and they see a lot of things, and they can advocate for themselves and how they want the system to grow and better with them as they grow as well. So it is a volunteer advisory group. They meet on the last Saturday of every month, concurrent with the school year. So they do get a summer break. And every year we take in an application process, selecting 15 to 20 folks to be on this committee. And they do have an annual capstone project. And if you hadn't guessed, this year's is focusing on that Rider Code of Conduct. They will actually be making a presentation sometime in June or July to Administrator Arnold to go over their findings and recommendations as well. And then as we move here from the Youth Transit Council and what they're doing, I want to touch on, and I don't invoke the name of Freddie Gray lightly. Andrew showed us some of those videos, but I do want to talk about how do we balance the enforcement of this new rule and the idea of restorative justice. We have a city in Baltimore where there is a gap that exists between median household incomes across different demographics that is drastically larger than in other cities in this country, especially across Black, Latino, and Asian communities. And one of those things that we cannot solve on our own as a transit agency is this idea of social equity and justice. In 2016, in case you weren't aware, the NAACP actually passed a resolution declaring access to public transportation to be a basic civil right. And that is probably one reason among many that a lot of agencies and states and municipalities are shy about touching this issue, because if you take away somebody's access to mobility and getting to school, to church, to their jobs, to medical facilities, you take away a big part of their ability to survive in these communities. And our governor actually said recently in a speech that I heard that physical mobility is economic mobility. We did touch a little bit previously on some of the federal level things that are being implemented. I believe it was September of 2024, the FTA issued Safety Advisory 24-1, which required all agencies who are subject to the PTAS regulation to conduct an agency review using their safety risk assessment process about transit worker assault. And besides using quantitative data, like I showed you from our Power BI dashboard that we have collected over the years, we also had to compare ourselves to a couple of other systems, and we have a legislative report as well that we are now producing every year where we do the same thing. For this particular SRA, safety risk assessment that we did, we also wanted to highlight what I'm touching on here is that we operate in a community. Our system reflects our city, and that's important because the issues we face around social inequity, social justice, mistrust of the government, that is not something we can solve on our own. And there is probably a very high correlation between the relationship of transit worker assault and income inequality and civil unrest. Now, these are things that we experience in Baltimore. A transit worker who represents state government, a government employee, they're an easy access point to express that frustration with your government. They're also somebody who is just a captive audience for you to talk to and potentially, escalate a situation. So one of those things is, especially in Baltimore, where over 80% of our workforce is living there. They're born there. A lot of folks, they have grown up in the area, is that they can afford to live in those communities. And respect is this really important cultural touchstone where how they are perceived at work a lot of times follows them back home into their communities. And that is sometimes what drives some of these issues with escalation. So we just want to be, again, thoughtful. We want to be deliberate and take our time in creating the best policy that we can so that we ultimately have one that works not only for protecting our valuable transit heroes, but also making sure that we can restore the rights of anybody who is subject to this ban policy. And again, I'm just going to flash this real quick. If you want to reach out to me, got a couple QR codes there. I am here, just like all my other colleagues, to provide resourcing and to further this discussion on stopping transit worker assaults. Thank you very much for your time today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Alexander, for that great presentation. And, as we prepare to let Deepika share her screen while we're waiting for her to get set up real quick. Just one point that I did want to mention from that presentation was like you talked before about the Youth Transit Council. Dr. Scott mentioned it earlier in the webinar prior to this, and even in this. Why are we doing all this? What's the point of these webinars? And at the end of the day, it's to engage the youth, to gauge the youth. And like I said earlier, what can youth do immediately after this webinar to make change in their community? So the fact that there are working councils like that in Baltimore, it gives hope. It puts us in good faith knowing that many of our departments of transportation are listening to the youth. They want to listen to the youth, and they want to hear what insights we have to give. Also shout out to Baltimore. You know what I mean? You guys are doing a lot of special stuff. And again, like I said, that was a fantastic presentation. I was really happy to see that rider code of conduct developed and just to see the restorative justice you guys are doing. So thank you so much for that. We will be now handing it over to Miss Deepika Gangwani. And, she actually brings a dual perspective from her role in not only workforce safety, but her service as an auxiliary police constable with the Toronto Police Service, as I mentioned before. So, her skills in emergency response, crowd management, community engagement. She has like a unique perspective and insight on how to connect safety operations with inclusive outreach. That intersection is a very special perspective, and we're very honored to have you, Ms. Deepika. By all means, the floor is yours. Thank you so much in advance. Oh, and then you're also on mute right now. Sorry about that.
Perfect.
Cool.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you sound great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. And thank you for an amazing introduction. So in this next 15-20 minutes, I'll quickly walk you through some of the comprehensive efforts that we have taken over here at the TTC to enhance the public safety for not just for our workers, but more importantly for our riders as well, and then holistically create a safer environment. So some of the initiatives that I'm going to talk about, they are multifaceted. A lot of the strategies that we are doing, yes, they are for our workers, but ultimately they're also for our riders because both have domino effects. So we just want to tie two together to see how we can create a safer environment. And also, all the strategies that we're proposing today or that we're sharing that we're doing at the TTC, it's just to give you a plethora of options. So we recommend agencies try out different things. Resourcing funding is one aspect of how we can improve rider safety, but there are other interventions that I'll be talking about, which agencies can pick and choose depending on the size, the shape, the rider dynamic, the operator dynamic that you might have. So let's get into the presentation. So I'll begin with some of the key measures that we have taken over here at the TTC to improve our operator safety. So something really fresh that has been happening since May of 2025. So it's just recent change. We've now adjusted our night crew schedules for our operators so that what happens that they can do their shift change in the garage, and they can end their shifts in the garage as opposed to doing a street takeover. Predominantly, the city is perceived to be safe, but yes, there are instances of unsafe areas. So this eliminates that risk, and then operators have that added safety net that they are taking over their crews inside the garage with a little bit more supervision and added layer of safety. As Andrew mentioned, cannot emphasize enough that building and maintaining strong partnerships with our union partners and communicating with them is really crucial. So something that we have established since August of 2022, a joint labor management committee where various prevention initiatives are being talked through, communicated, ideas are being bounced, etc. So the communication, the collaboration is really key because those are the operators and the union representing them would be able to advocate what are those needs. So having a very amicable relationship with the union is a must and which has been successfully working for the TTC. Something else that we've tried out over here since 2023 is the installation of the extended protective barriers on all our buses. Again, this has been done in the collaboration with the ATU International on the Bus Transit Innovation Project to prototype and even create safer barrier designs. These measures are to make sure that we're making a real difference in operator safety, but also we're listening to the concerns that are being brought forward. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about Transit Worker Assault Awareness Day. So this initiative basically is about to raise awareness of the challenges that are faced by our frontline workers. And when we say operators, operators are somebody's mom, somebody's dad, somebody's daughter. So as Isaiah and Andrew mentioned, humanize safety. So basically, this is a day on December 17th that we recognize over here. We reinforce the safety of our frontline workers. We reinforce that TTC is fully committed towards the safety of every single worker. It is just a day, but throughout we try to emphasize and engage with our employees, our riders, our community especially, to highlight the importance of why it is important to create a safe transit environment. Also, there's social media campaigns that follow around. Throughout the system, we post pictures and posters, social media, and of course in our stations. And we also share the things that we are doing to address some of the key issues that are being brought forward, and also ultimately pass on the message that this is the strategy that we are striving towards to foster a culture that respects and honors the safety, not just in one area, but entire TTC is striving to create a safer environment. So in this slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about, it's a blend of some of the interventions that we have tried over here at the TTC for our customers, but also for our employees. So we do understand that transit system, especially after COVID, has become one of the primary lifeline for individuals that are suffering or experiencing homelessness. So we are seeing a higher trend of underhoused folks being on our system more often than before. So it is imperative that we do have measures in place so that we balance equity and inclusion, but at the same time, we prioritize the safety of those operating the system, but as well as our customers who are riding our system. So some of the things, so first initiative that we've brought over here at the TTC is Streets to Home program. In this program, we basically have outreach workers from our city who are riding our system, are hopping on our vehicles, and they're basically connecting the individuals who are in need, who are experiencing homelessness, and connecting them with shelter support, food, and things like that, so that we are intervening them where they are riding. Right now, we have about 20 workers, including 16 outreach workers, and they're spread around 2 different shifts and 2 different outreach type of workers. So they're on and about our systems, they're identifiable in proper uniforms, and they're helping us manage that aspect of our vulnerable riders. Recently, we've also gone through some staffing increase. So we've deployed 130 extra customer service agents and 30 supervisors at our key locations. We've heard anecdotally, but also stats from our riders and from our employees that having more physical presence of our staff in proper uniform, proper training, brings that extra sense of safety and shows that we actually care, not for, yes, for our employees, but as well as for our riders. So we've strategically deployed our workers to different locations, and we've made sure that locations that are hotspot for certain issues now have extra staff present. Training. So as I think Andrew mentioned a little bit in his 10-point action plan, training is really key over here for us as well. So striving to provide de-escalation training, mental health training, how to deal and use narcotics, and things like that. So we've trained about 9,000 of our frontline employees. Again, a lot of work has to be done. So this is just something that we're getting into. We're also doing internal tabletop exercises, emergency drill exercises with various stakeholders, just so that we can also stay on top of different situations, incidents that are happening, and we can prepare for any unfortunate situations as much as we can. And also with employee turnover, yes, it's great that people get trained and then they get recertified, but it's always good to stay in touch every 6 to 8 months and do that check so that our employees know what to do in the event things were to unfold in a bad situation. Trauma support, so investing more in our employees' mental health and well-being, reviving our peer groups where possible so that employees have multiple avenues to talk about. Employee resource groups, that's something that's been in the talks to see how we can establish those resource groups, and also our EFAB program. Also training our leaders so that if our frontline supervisors or our managers or our operators are gone through something unfortunate, we have a proper protocol to follow in certain timelines, and showing that we actually care for our employees. Security presence. So apart from having our own in-house peace officers known as special constables, we've also added external 50 security guards who are trained in first aid, mental health, to provide that additional support to our frontline workers and help intervene in any nonviolent situations, just as an added layer of security and safety. So next, this is something really exciting that we've recently built in the last 4 or 5 months. So as Isaiah mentioned about Toronto Police Services, so basically what we wanted to do is solving and preventing assaults and creating a safer workplace is not a one person or a one department task. We feel that a lot of the stakeholders have to come together, and we have to work together in a collaboration to combat this issue, and this won't be solved overnight. So we have to apply multiple interventions at multiple time frames to see a reduction. So something that we've started is we wanted to connect with Toronto Police. Apart from regular patrolling, apart from regular enforcement, we wanted to see how can we balance off the force and policing with much more a positive building relationship with our community. So Toronto Police has a program called Auxiliary, and those officers are basically trained by the Toronto Police. They are volunteers for the Toronto Police. They get a very robust training, but the way they dress and the use of force they carry is very different from the police officers. So we felt that that could be something we can blend the two and have more of those officers in our stations engaging with our riders, but also help combat some of the societal issues that not just TTC, but most agencies are facing, such as mental health, substance abuse, homelessness, and then random acts of violence. So through this partnership, we figured this would be one more intervention for us to create a safer environment that would eventually help us reduce the transit worker assaults, but also create a system that is safe for our riders. And by collaboration, we would tackle some of these systemic issues. So the way the program has been working is basically what we have been doing is in the last 2-3 months, we've been picking some of our stations that have been hotspot in certain issues. Toronto Police has been great. They have been sharing some of the data with us, letting us know where they are seeing trends in crime. And our internal departments have been giving us insight as well. So we've been narrowing down some of our stations. We've been going out and for a brief period of time, 3 to 4 hours in a day, and setting up a table over there, having a mix of our special constables that are employed by the TTC, our auxiliary workers that are volunteers, but in turn, they're also TTC employees. So they have the dual benefit of knowing the TTC as well as wearing the uniform that represents the brand of Toronto Police. Our regular police officers who are also attending these events and our fare inspectors as well, and some civilian TTC employees. So we all come together, pick a station, and engage with our riders. And basically, we just talk to the riders when they're exiting the station or entering the station and just ask them, how's your day going? How's your ride? What lines do you frequently travel? Are you aware of the Safe TTC app? Is there any feedback that we can take to make the system better? And just by having those quick 2 to 3 minute conversations, we've been finding that the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, where riders are appreciating our presence in the system. And they're recognizing that we're not here to enforce, we're not here to arrest, but we're here to build a very positive relationship and a very positive interaction. So we've done about 5 of these events in the last 2 months at different stations, different times, and we've got a lot of positive feedback. So we're eventually going to build more and continue to see how we can expand this throughout our system. So some of the messaging that we've been delivering throughout this partnership or some of these pop-ups is our Safe TTC app. So we have an app where our customers or our employees can anonymously or discreetly report any safety concerns that they have. Our transit control department would get this complaint, they would open up and then deploy the necessary resources. So we've been promoting this app more. Also, something that we've been doing is creating this situational awareness while riders are riding on the TTC so that they're aware of safety mechanisms that are there. You may ask that a lot of my presentation is talking about riders, but ultimately if riders understand the rider etiquette, if riders understand what TTC values and why we're creating a safer environment, we feel that a lot of the aggressive behavior will eventually come down. So a lot of this is domino effect to teach riders how to ride safely, how to ride respectfully so that they can treat our workers with respect and safety. We're also teaching our passengers as they're passing by about some of the safety tips. Personally, if they're riding during the day, at nighttime, what resources are available to them. Property protection tips, meaning if they're riding in our system, what we would like them to look out for, and then also fraud, because fraud happens at any time, any day, any platform. So if our riders are aware of some of the safety features, they can in return be a little bit more mindful and support each other in creating that environment. So in some of the pictures, as you can see, our officers are engaging with our customers, explaining them about our safety features. And for the last 2 months that we've done this pop-ups, we've got really amazing feedback, and the customers want us to do more of these. So as I touched upon a little bit, as you can see in some of these pictures, the auxiliary uniform looks slightly different than the officers. It has a patch right in front which says auxiliary. The uniform color is different. It's light and blue compared to officers that are black. So we're also raising that awareness that we're not enforcement. We're here to build positive partnership with you. And we give out a little bit of swag, pens, stickers to just attract them, but also pass on the message. And through this partnership, what we have learned is that our Toronto Police is learning a lot more about TTC. Yes, they are a police system. They generally know about TTC, but it's more of a reactive approach. If we have a bad incident, we call them, they show up. But through these partnerships, they are taking a moment and understanding some of the issues that we are facing. So we're working in the background to see how we can solidify the proactive relationship and create an environment that is free of harassment, discrimination, hygiene issues, and tackle some of the problematic interactions, because they're also our partners in safety. Challenges that we're facing in our subway systems, in our buses, they're also facing out in the streets, because those are the same folks causing trouble in the system, but on the street as well. So both the agencies want to help each other. And something else, so it's similar to what we've been doing with the Toronto Police Auxiliary. We've also started doing these events called Talk TTC, but this is mostly with the TTC leadership, TTC management. So basically, it's an engagement series where TTC executives, our frontline staff, they directly connect with the riders in our station. So this initiative is aimed around rebuilding the trust, addressing safety concerns, humanizing the side of the transit leadership, as Andrew mentioned, and also having open conversations with our riders saying, hey, apart from you filling out a form because you received a crappy service, we're out in the station. Talk to us. Let us know what's bothering you. We'll take your feedback, we'll document it, and we'll get back to you to see what we are doing. So through these series, we've done 2 of these events so far. We're doing a 3rd one coming up in June. And what we've found is riders are appreciating that our top level management is actually out in the field, taking the time to interact. As you can see in some of our pictures, our deputy CEO is out. Some of our heads of the department, they're out and talking to the customers. And customers are actually honoring and valuing the vulnerability and honesty through these engagement events. One other aspect that I'd like to touch as well. Yes, transit assaults are something very negative, but we also as transit have a duty to make sure that the transit that we provide, the space that we provide is clean, it's welcoming, it's appealing for people to travel from to and fro. If our transit system is already dirty looking, then we are telling customers and our workers, we don't care about you. It's okay to graffiti the station. It's okay to litter our stations because we also are not taking care of our stations. So we've changed that approach. The city has been really, really keen and is very enthusiastic. We have taken on a 6-station cleanliness pilot project. So in that pilot project, what we are doing is we're targeting certain locations that are accessible by our customers, that are frequently used, that are first impressions by our customers, such as washrooms, high traffic areas, entrances, certain doors. And we want to make sure that they go through rapid cleaning so that we can maintain and give a nice look to our station. Station renewal projects, so updating the lighting, not just for the look of the station, but in turn help us with safety security of our station as well. Decluttering our stations, installing art to make it a little bit more appealing and welcoming and humanizing the space for them. Escalator, elevator improvements. So yes, we have to follow the AODA requirements and make sure our stations are accessible and safe for our seniors and people with disabilities. But at the same time, we also want to make sure that anybody and everybody can ride our system with no barrier or least barrier. Station deep cleaning blitz. So we've in summertime, we have an amazing program with summer students. We onboard about 100 summer students. And with that extra help, we try to do blitz cleaning, target some graffiti, address vandalism in our system, and take care of some of the issues that are very recurrent, but due to staffing resources, we might not be. And summertime, lots of festivals happening, lots of events happening. There's a lot more people riding our system. So we want to make sure that we provide that extra layer of cleaning where possible. And to support this project, City has granted us a little bit of funding on a short-term basis, just to see how we do for 6 stations. And then if the partnership goes really well, then we can establish and expand that partnership. So about 15 million are being invested on capital and operating side to advance the look of our stations, to support the safety security, yes, for our workers, but at the same time for our riders as well. So apart from all these initiatives, you may ask, how are all these initiatives giving fruitful results? So over the last 2 years, since these interventions have been implemented, we can say confidently that we have been seeing a downward trend in our offenses. By no means I'm underestimating or saying that assaults don't happen. Even one is too many. But we are seeing some of the results come in play, and it is in a downward trend, which is good, but that doesn't mean we stop doing the work. There's still a lot more to do. Keep maintaining the partnerships, work with our peers, work with our community partners to maintain that trend and take it even lower. Also, continuing to hire our special constables. So TTC, unlike US agencies, we don't have our own in-house police force, but we do have our own in-house peace officers. They're called special constables. So we're continuing to hire more of those so that they can be out and about in our system, patrolling and providing that extra layer of support, not just for our riders, but also for our workers when they see special constables out and about in the system. And something else, supporting the criminal code amendments to make sure that when workers are assaulted, proper and appropriate penalties are applied so that we can take care of our workers that are being affected. So yeah, I just wanted to give a quick overview of the things that TTC is doing. By again, not everything that I've said here is the only thing that TTC is doing. There's a lot more, but this was just to share in a conversational way some of the measures that we've taken over here, and apply what applies to you based on your agency, your ridership, and your worker dynamic. And happy to continue this conversation beyond this call as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Deepika. That was such an info-packed presentation. I'm literally gonna go back and watch the recording just so I could read all those slides again. Due to time constraints, we actually won't be able to get into the guided conversation, unfortunately. So I will use this time to get any final comments from Alexander, and then we'll pass it over to Natalie, and then we'll pass it over to Mr. Andrew. So Alexander, is there any final statements or closing statements you want us all to leave this session with?
Yeah, absolutely. Just keep open lines of communication, whether it's communication with third-party stakeholders like your social services, people with lived experience, advocacy groups, internally with your safety committees, with your operators, with people who are living through this day in and day out. Don't become so removed from the process that you inherently forget that everybody who is affected by this is a person who just wants to be able to do their job and get home to their families, their loved ones, and the things that are important to them.
Thank you so much for that, Alexander. Natalie, if you want to say any comments or say anything regarding the webinars and the presentations we've seen today, and your scope of this subject matter.
Yeah, I just want to say that this was awesome. I have
Yeah.
learned so much, and I
Yeah.
think that it is definitely an example of how, like, cross collaboration and communication really helps to resolve this issue. You know,
Yeah.
any social issue that we are trying to address, it never takes just one person or one entity or
Absolutely.
one group. You know, it is always multi-level, and I think that the fact that the union and different transit agencies and professionals throughout the transit system is here is exactly what we need to do, you know, to address these issues. So it's really good to see some of the programming that are in other agencies. And because I work in training and workforce development, you know, right now we have de-escalation training and things like that happening, and we have totally revamped that, you know, that training. It is really triggering me to understand how we could act even more, how we could do more in the
Yeah.
community. We have Red Line Extension happening, and we're doing a lot of community events. So, you know, maybe TWD can take a part in bringing some of this information to those community events. You know, not only informing people about, you know, the service that is about to be extended to them, but really partnering with them and increasing the respect that they have for, you know,
Right.
operators and frontline workers, for the youth and the communities that we are talking to. So I
Mhm.
think this is so awesome. I, you know, hope to stay in communication with you all.
Absolutely.
I am just getting so many different, you know, ideas that, possibly CTA can implement, in addition to the things that we are doing, as well. So thank you all so very much.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much for that one, Natalie. Andrew, you opened us out. I think it's only fitting if you close this out as well. Any final statements or closing statements that you want us all to leave with, having left this webinar?
Yeah, so first of all, I'd like to extend some appreciation and gratitude for all the great speakers who presented their information today. They were spot on. I think the key takeaway here today is collaboration, but that needs
Yeah.
to be defined. And what does that
Yeah.
really look like? And this is not on the agency and this is not on the city. But when we take a look at it, it's all levels of government. It's the agency, it's labor, and it's community. This
Yep.
this is the target of the audience that we need to address and that we need to come together. And I always say it's easy to point a finger and blame as opposed to giving a hand and making sure that someone is helped. And I think we're in a position here where we can actually help a lot of people. Transit professionals do a great job. I think they're underrated, underpaid, and this is coming from a labor perspective, and underappreciated for the work that they do. From what I grew up as a boy and what I've seen through the years, they're right up there with paramedics, firefighters, and police. They're in the front lines of these horrific hazards. We need to identify that. We need to respect that. Let's make transit the best it possibly can in North America. Let's give our patrons the best experience possible. But that really starts when it becomes worker-centered and that we give the success and the ability to our operators to be successful in their workplace. You know, when we take a look at those policies that we all agree to, diversity, equity, inclusion, fairness, respect, and dignity in the workplace, the nuts and bolts of that really comes down to is making sure that a worker can be successful in their work environment and giving them the tools necessary to succeed. And I think all the people on this panel today have made some type of indication that success is based on the tools necessary to move forward. To all the agencies, the industry experts today who've been on listening or participating, thank you kindly. Look forward to working with all of you. And I do believe that we have an opportunity to change the industry and the landscape of health and safety. Thank you to all of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Success is based on the tools necessary to move forward. That was a fire one. I enjoyed that one a lot. But everyone, policy driven change, community engagement strategies, the importance of partnership communications, and the importance of cross sector and, like Andrew just said, intergenerational collaboration. That's where it all starts. And the fact that we are even here to have this conversation to begin with just lets us know like the foundation is there and it's only going to continue to nurture and move forward.
Indeed.
We do want to thank you once again, everyone, for being able to attend our 2 Critical Conversations 2025 IA webinars. There's the QR code. Please complete that national survey. We're getting insight and intel from everyone across the nation. Please share your takeaways and best practices within your organizations, and continue engaging with not only IA, but your own organizations and communications to figure out the best ways to advocate for your communities and the best opportunities possible. Dr.
And
Scott?
I just can't thank everybody enough. This was just so rich, okay? I also think that we have a unique opportunity as an industry to really lead what is really a global, but I'll say, this is about an ecosystem. This is about culture. This is about environment. This is about civic and public behavior. I mean, who are we? Okay. And this is not just, as we've said, transit, but because we cross so many, all the things that we're talking about, I just can close my eyes and say, well, we're experiencing this. The retail industry is experiencing, hospitality is experiencing this, And so these are not just unique to us. And I think that there is and I'm going to throw this one out to the APTA emerging leaders. I think Karita's on here, is to let's take this the next stage, okay? Because it really is, we are setting and doing the work that you hear and you can see. We're going through some waters that haven't, there are very few that have really been doing it to the depth. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for us, there are a lot of learnings here that go beyond the transit industry. So thank you very much. This will not be the end of this conversation and the actions that take place. And once again, the question is, what am I going to do? And there's plenty of I and we in here, and we challenge you. Plus, remember, for the young people who are listening, that we have a trivia contest that kicks off our virtual innovation challenge weekend. It is on the evening of July 18th, and all of our materials and everything that's in here is all up for the trivia contest. It is open, and we have you hate to make everything monetary, but there is $1,000 that night cash prize for the young person that 18 to 25 years old who answers most of the most questions accurately. Okay. So anyway, thank you for everyone. I can't say enough, and we'll see you again very shortly. We'll see you again soon. Thank you. Take care. Fill
Thank you
out
so much,
that
all speakers.
survey.
Yep, I'm going to keep the QR code wide open right here, but you are all free to leave. And we will be in touch. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you. You're awesome. Take care.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you, Nellie. We love it. DP, Andrew. Oh my God, Alexander. We're so appreciative. Isaiah, you were awesome. Okay. Thank you.
for
Thank you
having
for
me.
joining us.
As always, he's awesome.
Take care, guys. Thank you so much. Appreciate
All
it.
right.
Take care. Bye-bye.